This review is going to cover fractions, decimals, and percents. You may want to print off the notes so you can follow along and make it a little easier on yourself. And this will cover all the stuff you'll need to know up until this point. So first, what is a fraction? Now, a fraction just represents a part of a whole, whatever that whole may be. And here it is illustrated in this picture. The whole in this case is the circle. And if you count, there are 8 pieces to this circle. The blue section, or the fraction of the circle that's blue, would represent 3 of those pieces. So 3 of the 8 pieces are blue. That would mean the other 5, which are orange, of the 8 are orange. So that is the fraction. If we are looking for how much is blue, 3/8 would be blue. If we were looking for how much is orange, 5/8 would be blue, or would be orange. Now let's recall the parts of a fraction. The numerator, and then we're going to use lots of terminology in grade 10, so we need to get used to this terminology. The top value in a fraction, in this case the 3 or the 5, is called the numerator. The denominator is always the bottom. So in this case, the denominator is 8. Now, let's recall reducing fractions or simplifying fractions. Now remember, a fraction is just part of a whole, and if we have a fraction that has something that has common in the top and the bottom, a common factor, we can reduce it. So we're trying to find a number that divides evenly both into 4 and 8. Now this one's a little bit easy because we could divide these both by 4. Let me just make that a little clearer here. If we divide this by 4, divide the top by 4, and divide the bottom by 4, the top, the numerator, 4 divided by 4 is going to be 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2. And there is that fraction reduced. 4 over 8 is equal to 1/2. We always will reduce fractions. That is a big part of Math 10. Well, there's 2 other types of fractions, an improper fraction and a mixed fraction. What is an improper fraction? Well, a fraction is improper if the numerator is greater than the denominator. So when the top is bigger than the bottom, let me just make that a little clearer again here. We have an improper fraction. So 7 over 4 is an improper fraction, or 3 over 2, improper fraction. What is a mixed fraction? Well, a mixed fraction is a combination of both a whole number and a fraction together. So we could have 1 and 1/3. That is a mixed fraction. There's a whole number and a fraction. We could have -2 and 3/4. Also a mixed fraction. Doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. Well, let's look at a decimal, and let's remember, what is a decimal? Well, this is probably an easy one. A decimal is any number that has a value after the decimal point. Now, the only thing about decimals we have to remember are what are these points at the end. As we work our way down, it's the reverse of working our way up. So let's first of all look at our values when you work your way up. The first number up from the decimal to the left represents the ones. So there would be 5 ones in this case. And the next one is 4 tens. And so if we take 4 tens and 5 ones, we would get just 45, etc. The next one up is hundreds, the next one up is thousands, the next one up is 10,000s, and that pattern continues. Now let's look beyond the decimal, to the right of the decimal. The first decimal place over is tenths, with this THS. It's like tens, but it's tenths. The next one over is hundredths, like hundreds, but hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, etc., etc., etc. And that is the placing of the decimal. Now, let's make a note here. Every number in the world can be written as a decimal. So I could take a simple number like 3, and I can write it as a decimal. It's just the values after the decimal are zeros. So I could write that 3.0000 as long as I like. If there are no values written, it's assumed to be 0. So even something like 13.7, if that was your question, we could write 0.0000 as many times as we like. So every number could be written as a decimal. What about rounding? Rounding is the key to decimals. When we're rounding a decimal, the first thing we need to do is choose the place you wish to round, whether it's tenths, hundredths, thousandths, etc. Sometimes also given to you as 2 decimals, 3 decimals, etc. Once we have that place chosen, we check the number to the right of that place and see if it is 5 or greater. If it's bigger than 5, then the number you've selected goes up by 1. If it's less than 5, the number you selected goes down by 1, and you discard all of the other values. So let's look at an example of rounding. Here's a number, 32.1568748. We want to round to the nearest hundredth. Now the nearest hundredth means we want to round to 2 decimal places. So I'm going to choose the place you wish to round. Now I'm going to check the number to the right of it. The number to the right in this case is a 6. That's definitely greater than 5. So what I do is I take the number I'm trying to round, the 5, and I add 1 to it. So it becomes 32.16, and everything else falls away. There would be that number rounded to the nearest hundredth, or 2 decimal places.